Right, crossing live to the States now, just outside Seattle, to get some reaction from the US to the Fed's decision last night. It has, as widely expected, raised rates by 25 basis points. We're very pleased to be speaking now to Keith Fitz-Gerald, principal at the Fitz-Gerald Group. Keith, good morning. It's lovely to speak to you.
Likewise. Thank you, as always, for having me back. What a pleasure.
So, we got exactly what we expected at the beginning of February, a 25 basis point rise, a slowing in the rise of interest rates. What people were really listening for was the commentary, and Jay Powell suggesting that while it's too premature to declare victory against inflation, we might be seeing the start of disinflation. What do you reckon?
I think that he's probably correct. Unfortunately, I think he's also in firm command of the obvious. But nonetheless, that was a very positive statement. And critically, Brady, it changed the psychology of the market. You and I have been talking in several past visits over the idea that that would be key. Psychology would be key, because if we can move beyond this, look beyond the fiscal mess, the fiscal challenge, whatever term you want to use, then the markets would respond positively. I think we got a nice taste of that today, and finally, it was good to see.
Before we get on to the markets, though, I want to find out from you, Keith, what it feels like on the ground, because if we look at the data that's led to this decision, we've got slowing home sales in the US, we've got a drop in consumer spending, and as Jay pointed out, the price of goods, if not services, is coming down. But we know that the effect of interest rates can famously lag. Does it feel like inflation, the genie's getting better in the bottle?
You know, it's interesting, because if you talk to the average American consumer, particularly if you're standing in the grocery store or you're talking about their medicine, their education, many of the things that it takes to make this country go around, I would submit the answer is no. There's still a great deal of unease. There's still a lot of uncertainty. And frankly, there's a lot of frustration and anger, because this was not caused by the American consumer. This is a repercussion of some dubious financial policies or lack of control. It depends on what side of the carpet you want to believe, the right or the left. But that's really moot. So the key now, the next few days and next week or two, is if the attitude can change, if the consumer can sense hope, if the consumer can sense that there is a path forward, then I expect those things to come roaring back. Prices, of course, are not going to recede for several months to come, if even a year to come. So we're going to feel it in our wallets for a long time. But again, the psychology was good. It was a shift today. It was powerful, and it can be real.
You're talking about market psychology, though, for the consumer who's seeing headlines about job losses. I think FedEx, the latest this morning to announce management losses. We've seen a lot of big tech companies as well. Is that not going to weigh in on consumer spending?
That's a very smart observation, and you're absolutely correct. It is going to weigh on the consumer, particularly those who are laid off. Many for the first time in their lives. Our tech companies, for example, have had tens of thousands of people for the first time in their lives having to deal with an economic contraction that uniquely affects them. So that's the part of the unintended consequences that are going to be with us for quite some time. But when you start talking about the truck drivers, the rail workers, the food delivery workers, the people who are in the blue-collar jobs, the opinion is quite markedly different.
But as you say, the markets were happy with it. Talk to me about the timing of the markets, what we're actually seeing play out in terms of market expectations, not just for these rate rises, but for the future.
Well, it's interesting, because there's really, again, a split developing between those companies that are investing for the future and those that are merely hoping to survive. I was very pleasantly surprised, for example, by Meta's report today. That was the first time I've ever seen CEO Mark Zuckerberg, in my opinion, deliver what I constitute as a really adult, level-headed, forward-looking forecast. He was very realistic. The markets like that. But you've seen companies like UPS and FedEx that have got basically the dog ate my homework situation, where they're facing challenges, supply chain bottlenecks, things that they haven't resolved. The markets are definitely going to split going forward.
So where are you putting your money at the moment, Keith, those you're speaking to? Are we back to defensive stocks?
No, actually, this is a time where you want to get on the gas a little bit. This is where you want to get back into the tech if you haven't been already. I've been very vocal about that since October. Tech would go back to the head of the class when the psychology changes. If people have sat that out, they have got a closing window on their hands. They've got a limited opportunity to get back into those stocks before they really take off. Because if this narrative of reduced rates, of lower inflation takes hold, then all of that money, and at this point there's almost $4 trillion sitting on the sidelines, all of that money is going to come rushing back in at light speed, and the markets are going to go into warp drive. So I like that component. I'm also looking at defense stocks. I'm looking at healthcare stocks. Those types of things are going to respond well to an environment where this happens.
So what are you expecting to see next from the Fed? Jay Powell, as is his job, is warning that interest rate hikes will be ongoing, that we won't see rates start to come down until next year. But he also needs to be a little bit hawkish, doesn't he, to get the behaviour, the response that he wants to see from people. Is there a bit of bluff in this? What do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I certainly wouldn't play poker with you. I think that, the question of what he has to do versus what he may want to do are entirely different. I think he's got to stay hawkish. He's got to stay at least a little concerned. And he's got to portray the fact that he is extremely observant when it comes to these things. So I think the Fed is going to continue to raise. If it can be a measured pace with a measured dialogue along the way, the markets will adapt to that. What the markets don't like and what the markets are responding to is the fact that the uncertainty has been eliminated. That's why we saw such a massive rush and a lot of money coming back in, is because we can return to certainty. That's a good thing for stocks. It's a good thing for economics in this country. It's a good thing for the psychology of this country.
And Keith Fitz-Gerald speaking to us from just outside Seattle, principal at Fitz-Gerald Group. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Hi, it's Keith here. Thanks for checking out today's highlight clip. What'd you think? Did I make sense? Is there something you'd like to add? Make sure you leave a comment down below, and of course, click subscribe to keep up right here on YouTube, or sign up for the email newsletter at the link below. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram for my real-time thoughts on markets, analysis, and a whole lot more.